Good morning. Before the noise of the day begins, before the news, the messages, the responsibilities, and the quiet worries you carry, pause here for a moment. This Sunday morning, January 17, we come to God not pretending everything is fine, but bringing Him our real lives. Some of us woke up with peace. Others woke up with a heaviness we can't fully explain. Some are facing clear challenges. Others are simply tired of walking through uncertainty. And it's into that space that Psalm 27, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" This is not a verse spoken by someone who never knew danger, confusion, or waiting. It is the prayer of a heart that has faced darkness and chosen trust anyway. Psalm 27 is not about denying fear. It is about refusing to let fear lead. Morning is a sacred moment. It sets the direction of the soul before the world tries to shape it. What you listen to now matters. What you believe now matters. What you speak over your life now matters. Psalm 27 reminds us that God's light is not dependent on our circumstances. It does not flicker when things feel unstable. It does not disappear when answers are delayed. God's light is steady, faithful, and present, even when the path ahead is unclear. Today's prayer is not rushed. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is honest. It is rooted. It is a quiet declaration that says, "I will trust God before I understand." As we begin this morning prayer, allow your heart to slow down. Let go of what you cannot control. Bring your fears, your questions, your hopes, and even your silence before God. You don't need perfect words. You don't need perfect faith. You only need a willing heart. Because when God is your light, darkness does not get the final word. Take a breath. We begin here. Number 1. The Lord is my light when fear tries to speak. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? This opening line of Psalm 27 is not a slogan meant to sound strong. It is a quiet declaration formed in the presence of very real threats, real uncertainty, and real pressure. It reminds us that faith is not born in the absence of fear, but in the decision of where we place our trust when fear shows up. Fear often speaks first in the morning. It speaks before logic has time to settle. It reminds us of unfinished problems, difficult conversations, fragile relationships, uncertain health, and unanswered prayers. Fear does not always shout. More often, it whispers. It asks questions that have no immediate answers and invites us to imagine outcomes we cannot control. Psalm 27 does not deny this reality. Instead, it begins by redirecting attention. The Lord is my light. Light in Scripture is not merely comfort. It is clarity. Light allows us to see what is actually in front of us, rather than what our imagination creates in the dark. It does not eliminate every shadow, but it gives enough visibility to move forward with steadiness rather than panic. When God is described as light, it means His presence changes how we interpret our circumstances. The situation may remain complex. The road ahead may still be uncertain, but fear no longer defines the meaning of what we see. God's light reframes it. Salvation in this verse is not only about being rescued from danger. It is about being anchored in the middle of it. It is the assurance that even if the challenge does not disappear immediately, we are not facing it alone. God's involvement is not delayed until things become desperate. He is already present, already aware, already engaged. Fear loses much of its power when we realize it is not the final authority. It may report what could go wrong, but it cannot determine what God will do. Fear focuses on limitations. God's light reveals possibility grounded in truth, not illusion. This is why Psalm 27 is especially powerful as a morning prayer. At the start of the day, our minds begin to forecast what lies ahead. Fear tries to predict failure, disappointment, or exhaustion before the day has even begun. But light interrupts those predictions. It invites us to step into the day with awareness rather than anxiety. God's light does not promise a day without difficulty. It promises presence within it. It promises wisdom for decisions, strength for endurance, and peace that steadies the heart when emotions fluctuate. When fear asks, What if today is too much? God's light responds, you will not face it alone. When fear says, you are not prepared, God's light reminds us, I am sufficient. This morning, choosing God as your light is an intentional act. It is a decision to trust His guidance more than your assumptions. It is a quiet surrender that says, I will not let fear lead my thoughts today. Fear may still speak. It may still attempt to influence your emotions, but it does not get the final word. Because when the Lord is your light, darkness does not control the direction of your steps. It only proves that light is present. Number 2. Confidence that comes from God, not circumstances. Confidence rooted in God is not built on how the day looks when you wake up. It is not formed by good news, smooth plans, or predictable outcomes. It is formed by trust. Quiet, practiced trust, learned over time in both calm and difficulty. Psalm 27 points us to this kind of confidence, the kind that does not depend on circumstances behaving well. So much of what we call confidence is actually control. We feel secure when things are familiar, when plans are clear, when progress is visible. But the moment uncertainty enters, that kind of confidence weakens. Psalm 27 offers something stronger. It invites us to anchor our confidence not in what we can manage, but in who God is. This confidence is not denial. It does not pretend that problems are smaller than they are. It simply refuses to believe that problems are bigger than God. It allows us to look honestly at what is difficult without losing our footing. David speaks of courage not because enemies are absent, but because God is present. That distinction matters. Confidence shaped by God does not require perfect conditions. It grows in imperfect ones. It steadies the heart when answers are incomplete and outcomes are unknown. In the morning, this truth becomes especially important. The day ahead may contain moments that test your patience, challenge your peace, or stretch your strength. Confidence built on circumstances will rise and fall with each moment. Confidence built on God remains steady, adjusting without breaking. God-centered confidence changes how we respond. Instead of reacting out of fear, we pause. Instead of rushing to control outcomes, we choose trust. Instead of assuming the worst, we remain open to God's guidance unfolding step by step. This kind of confidence does not eliminate emotion. You may still feel concern. You may still feel tired. You may still have questions, but those feelings no longer dictate your direction. God's faithfulness becomes the reference point. Confidence that comes from God also frees us from comparison. We stop measuring our progress against others and start grounding ourselves in obedience and faithfulness. We realize that our path does not need to look impressive to be meaningful. It only needs to be walked with trust. Psalm 27 teaches us that confidence is not loud. It does not demand attention. It is patient. It is resilient. It knows that God's timing is not careless, even when it is slow. This morning, you are invited to release the pressure to feel strong. You are not asked to prove anything. You are invited to trust, to stand in the assurance that God is involved in what concerns you today, even if you cannot yet see how. When confidence comes from God, you do not need certainty to keep moving. You do not need guarantees to remain faithful. You only need trust. And that trust, quietly practiced, becomes strength. Number 3, seeking God's presence above all else. There is one thing I ask of the Lord. This is what I seek. These words from Psalm 27 carry a kind of focus that feels rare. They reveal a heart that has learned, through experience, what truly sustains it. Not quick answers, not immediate relief, not control over circumstances, but the presence of God. So often, our prayers are shaped by urgency. We come to God needing something to change, something to resolve, something to ease the weight we feel. And those prayers are honest. God welcomes them. But Psalm 27 invites us to look beneath urgency and discover a deeper desire. The desire to be near God regardless of outcome. Seeking God's presence is not passive. It is intentional. It means choosing to turn our attention toward God even when our minds are full of concerns. It means valuing closeness with Him more than clarity about the future. This kind of seeking requires trust, because it places relationship before resolution. In the morning, this choice sets the tone for everything that follows. Before decisions are made, before voices compete for attention, Psalm 27 calls us to anchor our hearts in God's presence. It reminds us that being with God is not something we fit into the day, it is what shapes the day. To dwell in God's presence is to live with awareness that He is near. It is to carry that awareness into conversations, responsibilities, and quiet moments alike. God's presence becomes the place where anxiety softens and perspective returns. This does not mean distractions disappear. It means they lose their power to dominate. When God is at the center, everything else finds its proper place. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt urgent becomes less demanding. Seeking God first also reshapes our desires. Over time, we begin to want what aligns with His heart rather than what simply feels urgent. We learn patience. We learn trust. We learn to rest without disengaging. Psalm 27 does not present seeking God as an escape from life. It presents it as the way to live life with depth and steadiness. God's presence becomes the place where strength is renewed, not forced, where clarity emerges, not rushed. This morning, you are invited to simplify your focus. Not because life is simple, but because your soul needs one steady place to return to. Let God be that place. Let His presence be your priority before productivity, before problem solving, before planning. When you seek God above all else, you are not ignoring your needs. You are placing them in trustworthy hands. You are choosing alignment over anxiety. Today, seek God not for what He can give, but for who He is. Because in His presence you will find what your soul has been quietly asking for all along. Number 4. God is shelter in times of trouble. There are seasons when life feels exposed, when plans no longer protect us, strength feels thinner than usual, and the future looks uncertain. Psalm 27 speaks directly into those moments, not with panic, but with reassurance. It tells us that God is not only aware of our trouble, He becomes our shelter within it. A shelter is not the removal of difficulty. It is a covering that allows us to endure without being overwhelmed. This is an important truth to hold in the morning, before the weight of the day begins to press in. God does not promise that trouble will never come, but He does promise that when it does, we are not left unprotected. Trouble often brings a sense of vulnerability. It makes us aware of how much is outside our control. It challenges our sense of stability and forces us to face our limits. Psalm 27 does not respond to this vulnerability with denial. It responds with refuge. God as shelter means there is a place for your soul to rest even while your circumstances remain active. It means that when emotions rise and clarity feels distant, you can step back into God's presence and find steadiness again. This shelter is not fragile. It does not depend on your emotional strength or your ability to stay calm. It depends on God's faithfulness. In times of trouble, God's protection often shows up quietly. It may appear as peace that arrives without explanation, as restraint when fear tries to take over, as strength that carries you through moments you thought would break you. This kind of shelter does not draw attention to itself. It simply holds. Psalm 27 reminds us that God hides us not to isolate us, but to preserve us, to protect our hearts from being consumed by fear, bitterness, or despair, to guard our perspective, so we are not defined by the trouble we face. This truth is especially grounding in the morning. As you prepare to step into responsibilities, conversations, and unknown outcomes, you do so under God's covering. You are not exposed to the day without protection. You are not walking into uncertainty alone. God as shelter also invites us to stop striving for control. It allows us to release what we cannot manage and trust that God is actively involved. Not distant, not delayed, present. Trouble may still demand your attention today. It may still challenge your patience, but it does not have the authority to strip away your peace. God's shelter remains intact regardless of what unfolds. This morning, rest in that truth. Let your heart settle under God's protection. Let His presence shield you from unnecessary fear and steady you for what lies ahead. You are not unguarded. You are not abandoned. You are sheltered by God, and that is enough to carry you through this day. Number 5. Learning to wait without losing faith. Waiting is one of the most difficult spiritual disciplines, not because it requires effort, but because it requires trust. Psalm 27 speaks openly about this tension. It does not rush past it or soften it. It acknowledges that waiting can stretch the heart, test patience, and quietly challenge faith. Waiting often feels like inaction, but in God's economy, it is never empty. It is a season where faith is refined, not abandoned. When answers are delayed, when direction feels unclear, when progress seems slow, waiting becomes the space where trust is either deepened or depleted. Psalm 27 encourages us to wait with expectation rather than resignation. This kind of waiting is active on the inside even when nothing appears to be changing on the outside. It is a posture of the heart that says, I may not see what God is doing yet, but I trust that He is working. The hardest part of waiting is not time, it is uncertainty. We struggle not because we are waiting, but because we do not know how long the waiting will last, or how the outcome will unfold. Psalm 27 does not promise clarity about timing. It promises strength for endurance. Learning to wait without losing faith means resisting the urge to force outcomes. It means choosing patience over panic. It means allowing God's timing to unfold without assuming that delay equals denial. This kind of waiting requires humility, because it asks us to release control and remain open. In the morning, this truth steadies us. We step into the day aware that some questions may remain unanswered. Some prayers may still be in progress, but we are not left unsupported in the waiting. God remains present even when movement feels slow. Waiting with faith also protects the heart. It keeps us from becoming bitter, restless, or discouraged. It allows us to remain tender rather than tense. Trust grows not because circumstances improve, but because God proves Himself faithful over time. Psalm 27 invites us to wait courageously, not with passive resignation, but with quiet confidence. To stand firm in the belief that God's goodness does not expire with time, that His promises are not weakened by delay. This morning, if you are waiting for clarity, healing, direction, or peace, know that your waiting is not wasted. God is shaping something within you, even now. Faith is being strengthened in ways you may not yet see. Waiting does not mean God is absent. It means He is working beyond your awareness. Today, choose to wait with trust. Let patience replace pressure. Let faith remain steady, even when progress feels slow, because those who wait on the Lord are not left empty. They are strengthened. Number 6. Trusting God's goodness even before it appears. One of the quiet challenges of faith is learning to trust God's goodness when there is no immediate evidence to point to. Psalm 27 speaks to this challenge with honesty and hope. It acknowledges that there are moments when goodness feels distant, when circumstances do not yet reflect what we believe to be true about God. Trusting God's goodness before it appears requires a shift in perspective. It asks us to believe not based on what we see, but on who God has proven Himself to be. This kind of trust is not blind. It is built on memory, on past faithfulness, on promises spoken, on character revealed over time. Psalm 27 does not ignore the reality of struggle. It simply refuses to let struggle define God's nature. It declares that God's goodness is not suspended during difficult seasons. It is present, even when hidden from immediate view. In the morning, this truth matters deeply. The day ahead may not offer instant reassurance. You may step into responsibilities that feel heavy, or situations that feel unresolved. Trusting God's goodness means choosing hope without demanding immediate proof. This kind of trust steadies the heart. It keeps us from becoming cynical. It guards us against despair. It allows us to remain open, even when disappointment feels close. Trusting God's goodness also reshapes how we interpret delay. Instead of assuming abandonment, We learn to see delay as part of a larger process. Not every good thing arrives quickly. Some things are formed slowly, carefully in ways we may not understand at the time. Psalm 27 teaches us that belief often precedes visibility. We choose to trust first, and understanding follows later. This order feels uncomfortable, but it is foundational to faith. God's goodness is not always loud. It often shows up quietly in sustained strength, in unexpected peace, in the ability to keep going when we thought we could not. These are signs of goodness that do not depend on circumstances changing. This morning you are invited to trust God's goodness without conditions. Not because everything is resolved, but because God's character remains constant. Let go of the need to see the full picture. Allow trust to lead. When you trust God's goodness ahead of time, you protect your heart from discouragement. You remain anchored when outcomes are uncertain. You allow hope to stay alive. Even if today feels unclear, God's goodness has not disappeared. It is still present, still active, still working towards something meaningful. Choose to trust that truth this morning, because faith that trusts before it sees is faith that endures. Number 7, rising with strength, courage, and hope. Psalm 27 does not end in hesitation. It moves toward resolve. After acknowledging fear, waiting, and uncertainty, it calls the heart to rise, not in arrogance but in strength shaped by trust. This rising is not about sudden confidence or dramatic change. It is about choosing courage grounded in God's presence. Strength, in this context, is not force. It is endurance. It is the ability to stand without collapsing under pressure. Psalm 27 reminds us that strength grows from waiting on God, from remaining steady, even when progress feels slow. This kind of strength is formed quietly, often unnoticed, but deeply rooted. Courage follows strength, not the kind that denies fear, but the kind that moves forward despite it. Courage shaped by God is calm. It does not rush. It does not need to prove itself. It simply takes the next step with trust. Hope completes this movement. Hope is not optimism detached from reality. It is expectation anchored in God's faithfulness. Psalm 27 invites us to hope not because circumstances are predictable, but because God is reliable. In the morning, this call to rise becomes practical. We rise into responsibilities, conversations, decisions, and unknown outcomes. Psalm 27 does not promise that these moments will be easy. It promises that we do not face them empty-handed. Rising with strength means we carry God's presence into the day. Rising with courage means we remain faithful, even when comfort is absent. Rising with hope means we expect God to be at work, even in small, quiet ways. This kind of rising is steady, not rushed. It allows us to engage the day without being consumed by it. It keeps our hearts anchored while our lives remain active. Psalm 27 ends with an encouragement that is both gentle and firm. To be strong and take heart. Not because everything is resolved, but because God is present. This morning you are invited to rise, not because you feel ready, but because you are supported. You do not need to have all the answers. You do not need to feel fearless. You simply need to trust enough to take the next step. Let strength replace exhaustion. Let courage replace hesitation. Let hope replace heaviness. As you move into this day, carry Psalm 27 with you. Not as a distant text, but as a living reminder. God is your light. God is your refuge. God is faithful, and that is enough to rise. Conclusion. As this morning prayer comes to a close, take a moment to remain still. Not because everything is resolved, but because you are grounded. Psalm 27 does not promise a life without darkness. It promises light that is stronger than it. It reminds us that fear does not have the final word. Waiting is not wasted, and God's goodness is not dependent on what we see right now. This Sunday morning, you do not step into the day alone. You rise with light ahead of you, shelter around you, and strength within you. Whatever questions remain unanswered, whatever burdens still linger, whatever paths feel uncertain, God is present in them all. Let this prayer stay with you as the day unfolds. Return to it when fear tries to speak. Remember it when patience feels thin. Hold on to it when hope feels quiet. God's light does not fade as the hours pass. It walks with you. So go into this day with a steady heart. Choose trust over fear. Choose patience over pressure. Choose hope, even when it feels small. Because God is faithful and his presence is enough. If this prayer spoke to your heart today, take a moment to support this channel. Like the video to help others find encouragement. Subscribe for more morning prayers and scripture reflections. And share in the comments what Psalm 27 means to you right now. May your day be guided by God's light, your heart sheltered by his presence, and your steps strengthened with quiet courage. Amen.